Everyone, it's Alex, and today I would say this video is probably a lot like in the same realm as a past video I did about my favorite fictional F-boys, in which on one hand I try my best to give book recommendations, but also I am still bemused by my brain. So for today's installment, it's actually based on how recently this month, or last month, I started going back into office for work, and my coworker made this comment to me that awakened something in me or snapped me out of my midday disassociation, in which my coworker commented that my outfits are very soft boy-esque. Of course, I had to immediately ask a clarifying question if they meant that I'm not a soft boy in a male manipulator music type way, and they kindly said no. But that did make me wonder, what are some books I own that are maybe to some capacity, there are books I've liked and I've read, but maybe ones I might closely associate to the soft boy aesthetic that I could then match to certain articles of clothing that I've been wearing to work and wear often, and they're clothes I like that may indeed fall under the soft boy aesthetic too. Kind of basing it on a tier ranking of what I mentioned first being maybe an article of clothing that's like most soft boy to me, mixed with a book recommendation that might also be very soft boy-esque too in my mind. Which in a way I think this could be really fun to try to think of these book recommendations that I come up with, because it likely means I can't name any books by women, with the exception of one woman writer that I'll name in a second, that I feel like she's really taking the sort of clothing identity aesthetic of the 2020s by storm. And really quickly, for no one that knows what a soft boy is, to quickly quote from a scientific journal known as The Guardian. The Guardian defines what a soft boy is in a way that I think is accurate, but also in a way that I really love. And the Guardian article says, "He says he's an outsider, which is a straightaway soft boy move, but he doesn't enjoy Shrek because there are much better films. That's obvious, isn't it? And then, please tell me you've watched Pulp Fiction is just the greatest sentence ever." So me starting this off with giving that tease to the lone woman writer of this list, I feel like I have to mention The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt. And the article of clothing to match this peak soft boy book would have to be the wide-legged pant with the loafer or white chunky sneaker combo. The Goldfinch is a novel about a boy named Theo as he grows into his early adulthood, as he went through like a really traumatic experience whenever he was a child, when he goes to a museum and there's a terrorist attack in which he also loses his mother. And losing his mother, he does gain access to this information shrouding this mysterious painting called The Goldfinch that people are really seeking out, as it's very sought after. And the book does bring on this very Dickensian sort of tone on the aspect of Theo and watching him evolve throughout his life and going through all of these hardships related to family, like losing his mother in a horrible accident, but also with things like friendships and also romantic relationships too. And I liked The Goldfinch as a reading experience, but I do find that it was spread a bit too thin, as Tartt really tries to make this really long and grand narrative interesting at every turn by feeling like she's trying to accommodate all these different plot points. But by the end of it all, it was feeling a bit too larger than life for me, so I think it did fall flat. But through Theo's descriptions of lived experience and also his relationships, I do think he actually genuinely does sort of have this consciousness towards things like beauty and art and how they all feel happenstance in comparison to life overall. I'm sure soft boys would love to project their own hardship onto Theo, since I would say this book is also one of the scientific origins of testosterone. I know that youths today really love The Secret History by Donna Tartt, but where I feel like that's apparently more with the dark academia crowd, which I agree with, I feel like The Goldfinch is much more suited toward the soft boy crowd, since I feel like Theo's journey is rooted in this sense of being brooding and mysterious, to where ultimately, if I think about it, he's just a really angsty soft boy. So for the next offender on my soft boy article of clothing theory, we have the barn jacket. This often comes in shades of maybe brown or green with like a corduroy collar. So think of something like Carhartt, but not Barbour, because Barbour is too preppy, and slap on those wide-legged pants I mentioned in my last pairing, preferably Dickies, and you're all set. So my book pairing with the barn jacket is giving me very small town, ready for the big city, escapism vibes. So for this one, I would say or recommend On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong. This novel follows an Asian American boy growing up in Connecticut, USA, as we follow a main character named Little Dog, as he is in this very white-dominated area, and I feel like this book is very like pull yourself up by the bootstraps. Along with coming of age in general, I think being a soft boy staple that is sought after, I feel like also soft boys would really rein in on how lyrical that this book's prose is. And Vuong really shows off his prose with some beautiful lyrical imagery here, especially related to trying to unravel Little Dog's mother's perception of the United States since immigrating to the States as well. Although unfortunately I do feel mixed about this book, which I try to explain about in my book review on my channel. On one hand, I do think it perfectly captures this quiet atmosphere of yearning and the desire to belong. But I just wish Vuong would have synthesized Little Dog better in trying to have the reader really understand exactly what he's desiring without it being fluffed with all this very flowery prose, which in some ways, like I said, really works, but sometimes I feel like it all gets muddled down by trying to understand exactly what the prose is really trying to get at. Because in ways I feel like Little Dog lacked this sense of consciousness in his own way, of a sense of voice, versus it always feeling like I understand that Vuong is the one writing this story. It's as if Vuong is the main character and he's just observing Little Dog himself, versus the story feeling like it's told from Little Dog's perspective. But yeah, I feel like between Softbois eating this up for its prose and again giving that sort of small town outsider feeling, I feel like they'd also really like the upcoming new poetry collection by Vuong coming out, which I myself will probably also read. For the next article of clothing for Softbois, it is definitely the wide collar, relaxed fit, short sleeve button-up look. And for this pairing, I would pair it with Stoner by John Williams. Stoner tells the story of a man named William Stoner who's really navigating a big portion of his life through working in academia. Although his journey to get there is, like, truthfully quite underwhelming in the grander perspective of how William observes his own life later on, since we follow him through like his late adolescence into his way into middle-aged, he's married and stuff like that. Although what's interesting is that William never takes on this identity of feeling apathetic towards anything. In ways, I feel like he actually tries to unearth exactly how everything feels like a coincidence to him to get where he was, on the basis of the background of contexts like war, and how in his time he feels very privileged for the spaces that he inhabits. These series of coincidences being kind of like a domino effect too, of how William feels like he snowballed into things like his friendships, his professional life, and also his romantic life. So with this idea of thinking of the spaces we can inhabit possibly through our own privileges, I think with Stoner it's interesting because William takes on the centerpiece of his life, not necessarily consciously being himself, but it feels like life in itself is the centerpiece, and he's just in the parameters, vibing and hanging out. And so with my selection of the shirt, I feel like, the shirt area is often the centerpiece of what makes an outfit, or maybe what people think of first. So with this book pairing, it reminds me a lot of the basis of how William Stoner feels like someone that's really caught on impressions, on how impressions rely on the characteristics of what make people who they are. And overall with style, in this case, I feel like it could be the same for it trying to be a mirror to how people feel by taking on these identities, possibly like a soft boy. But on the other hand, how really things can all come together, kind of like what William Stoner's life is about. And I feel like through William's sense too of imposter syndrome, I think it fits into the main idea of how these archetypes of style that we seem to have now is really reminiscent of that feeling. And in general, I think trends in style is interesting, between other things I watch on YouTube, like people commenting on the ideas of aesthetics, one being, soft boys, and another one I mentioned briefly with Donna Tartt being things like dark academia. But yeah, as far as Stoner goes, I remember actually really liking it, but I read it so long ago, I think probably 5 years ago, that I don't really remember much of it. But I do like how it felt like William Stoner was in a position of himself not realizing how he often got to spaces where he is. So I think that's like a timeless feeling, and I really liked it through his perspective. But I feel like Softbois too would eat this up. Again, you know, just projecting their own baggage onto someone like William. Or if anything, since Stoner is a finky book, it being a perfect playground of a soft boy manipulating you into telling you what the meaning of the book is. The second to last part of my soft boy ensemble for outfits is definitely one I'm a big offender of, and that's the small beanie, like a fisherman's beanie, or at least one that's like ribbed, and it doesn't cover like, you know, past your ears or anything like that. And I would pair this with Lonnie by Max Porter. There's just something about a seasonally inappropriate small beanie that I think a soft boy can confide in, with their disregard of seasonal headwear kind of putting them in this dreamy space anyway, where they might just enjoy also a dreamy book about this urban legend that can talk. Lonnie tells the story of a boy named Lonnie who's constantly visited by this urban legend named Dead Papa Toothwort. And actually the storytelling comes from Dead Papa Toothwort, so it does sort of take on this more and more mythical sense of surrealism, which I really liked. And I think Porter does a really great job too of not making Dead Papa Toothwort necessarily villainous or antagonistic, making the atmosphere of the story even more compelling, as it feels like the fiction in which Porter is writing only helps enhance the lore that's being introduced to the reader. And as with my past book recommendations so far, I feel like Softbois would eat this one up, especially the small beanie offenders. I feel like they can kind of intersect into the commonly mistaken art boy aesthetic with their portfolios and can backpacks. I could feel that a soft boy would read this and they're doing their semester art portfolio based on this book, and then they dress up as Dead Papa Toothwort for Halloween, and then they try introducing you to read the book even though they already forgot that you were the one to introduce them to the book in the first place. And for the final piece of the soft boy puzzle for the outfits, one might even call this an accessory ? And it's those small like miniature carabiners that you clip onto your belt loop, which I do all the time. Because when I think about it, I am surprised I don't see people like use them more, because I don't know where people put their keys. So since the carabiner is like resourceful in managing different little things you have, like your keys, I would probably relate it closely to, book-wise, maybe a soft boy reading a essay collection. And if there's one essay collection I feel like a soft boy would read like entirely or pick from the start, it's probably anything by Chuck Klosterman, but I'll just say his collection called For, because that's the one I own. Chuck Klosterman is a pop culture essayist, but I believe he's written 2 novels, which I haven't read. And this essay collection has everything between music, like about music, and also having interviews in it. And what I actually really like is that within this collection that Klosterman actually writes introductions to his own essays or interviews, as Klosterman is really self-aware to the work that he deals with working in media or writing on pop culture. His writing really taking on this absurdist quality of how his reflections on media almost feel like he's writing his own script to a reality TV show that he's inspired from watching, making the tone or the contents of the things that he's writing about feel straight from like he's Truman in his own Truman Show. 2 standouts for me though in this collection is definitely his interview with Britney Spears, but also another piece he has about pitching, writing about eating 100 chicken nuggets within, I want to say like a week or 2. So this is definitely a book that a soft boy brings to do, like he's on his way to run errands, but maybe he has some free time to do some reading, or he's hunkering down on like his campus Starbucks or something. Or if anything, with the nicely all black minimal book design, this can match the soft boy outfit. And that's all the book recommendations I have, and that's it for whatever this video was. I would hope that everyone knows that this video is just in jest, and I know it's a little different than what I usually do, but I'm just so fascinated by, again, those like subcultures and the idea of micro trends towards those identities that people are adopting through fashion in the 2020s. And I think in doing so with like aesthetics like soft boy or whatever else, I think it actually makes reading and like books more commonplace as something that people are becoming more interested in, which I think is always a good thing, even if it might mean that books themselves work as aesthetic tools. So yeah, it's so fascinating how people are using literature as a form of like a brand or an aesthetic. Which leads me to say, if you're even aware of like, you know, as an example, the soft boy phenomenon or other subcultures of like probably like everyone else, what I'm just getting all from my TikTok algorithm, I'd be super curious if you think I was like on the mark of getting these book recommendations correct, or even with the outfits I was like thinking of for soft boys, if those are even right, or if I'm missing a pivotal piece of the puzzle. Either way, as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.